The cockpit door swung open mid-flight, and there she was, Captain Josephine Reyes, all steel and scars, her prosthetic arm gleaming under the harsh cabin lights as she steadied herself against the frame. "Ladies and gentlemen," her voice crackled over the intercom, steady as the Atlantic below, "we're hitting turbulence over the strait, buckle up." Julia Harlan, slouched in first class with a gin and tonic sweating in her hand, let out a sharp laugh that cut through the murmurs, whispering to her seatmate just loud enough, "Great, a one-armed bandit at the helm. Hope she doesn't drop the plane like her coffee this morning." By the time the wheels kissed the tarmac at Malaga Airport, Julia had already forgotten the quip, her mind racing toward the olive-shaded streets of Granada, where her new life as a marketing exec for a boutique wine importer awaited. Spain's southern coast unrolled like a sepia postcard, whitewashed villages clinging to hills, the Sierra Nevadas jagged teeth piercing the horizon, but Julia felt none of its romance. At 34, she was all edges, ambitious, orphaned young and clawing her way from a trailer park in Ohio to corner offices in Chicago, only to burn out on corporate ladders that favored the connected. This move was her reset, sun-drenched days, siestas that stretched into strategy sessions, and maybe, just maybe, a chance to outrun the loneliness that gnawed like bad paella. She grabbed her roller bag, the one monogrammed with JH in gold that screamed, "I've made it," and strode through customs, ignoring the twinge in her ankle from a half-forgotten college soccer injury. The air outside hit like a lover's breath, warm, laced with jasmine and diesel. A driver in a faded Renault held a sign, "Harlan, Venedos del Sur." Julia slid into the back seat, firing off emails on her phone. The job was a dream on paper: revamp the brand for an American market hungry for authentic Spanish vintages. Her boss, some shadowy exec named J. Reyes, poached from a rival firm. Julia smirked, probably another silver-haired suit droning about synergies. The drive to Granada twisted through cork oak groves and Moorish ruins, the radio crooning flamenco-tinged pop that made Julia's skin prickle. She'd studied up the Alhambra's honeycombed arches, the Albayacin's labyrinthine alleys where gypsy legends whispered in the walls. But culture was currency to her, another tool to wield in boardrooms. By evening, the city unfolded in terracotta waves, its streets alive with buskers strumming guitars under lantern glow. Her apartment, a restored cave house in the Sacramento Hills, smelled of fresh lime plaster and distant sea salt. Julia unpacked with mechanical efficiency, power suits in the armoire, a single photo of her late mother, faded denim and defiant smile, propped on the nightstand. First day at Venedos del Sur dawned crisp, the office a converted finca on the outskirts, vines heavy with Tempranillo grapes marching toward the Sierra like green soldiers. Julia arrived early, heels clicking on terracotta tiles, her pitch deck clutched like a shield. The team milled in the open-plan space, designers sketching labels, a sommelier swirling reds in crystal. "Bienvenida, Julia," said Elena, the HR lead, a wiry woman with a no-nonsense bob. "Jay will be here shortly. She's particular." Julia nodded, scanning the room for weaknesses, allies. Particular. Code for demanding, she figured. She settled at her desk, overlooking a courtyard fountain where pigeons cooed like conspirators. Minutes ticked by, she revised her opener, something about millennials craving heritage in a bottle. Footsteps echoed, heavy, deliberate, with the faint tap of a cane. Julia looked up, and the world tilted. There, framed in the doorway, was the pilot from the flight. Captain Josephine Reyes, mid-30s, broad-shouldered in a crisp white blouse tucked into wide-leg trousers, her dark hair cropped close, a faint scar tracing her jaw like a secret. The prosthetic arm, matte black and engineered for precision, caught the light as she gripped a leather portfolio. Her eyes, deep brown and unyielding, swept the room before locking on Julia. A beat. Two. Recognition flickered, then iced over. "Miss Harlan," Josephine said, voice like aged Rioja, smooth, with an undercurrent of bite. "I trust the flight was enlightening." The room hushed, Elena shifted uncomfortably. Julia's mouth went dry, the gin-fueled mockery replaying in her skull like a bad loop. One-armed bandit. Drop the plane. Oh God. She stood, extending a hand that trembled just enough to betray her. Captain, Ms. Reyes. Pleasure. The landing was flawless. Josephine's grip was firm, her real hand calloused from yokes and throttles, the prosthetic cool and unyielding. Up close, Julia caught the scent of her, bergamot and engine oil, a mechanic's cologne. Call me Joe. And it's just Reyes here. Walk with me. The tour was a gauntlet, fermentation vats humming like hearts, barrel rooms dim as confessions, a tasting terrace where the Sierra sprawled wild and unforgiving. Josephine moved with a pilot's economy, each step measured, the cane a subtle extension of her will, not a crutch. Julia trailed, babbling about demographics and digital campaigns, but Joe cut through like a crosswind. We don't sell wine, Julia. We sell stories. The soil here bled for centuries, Moors, Catholics, anarchists. Ignore that, and you're peddling swill. By lunch, Julia's pitches lay eviscerated on the conference table, Joe's red pen a scalpel. You're thinking Chicago, Joe said over gazpacho, her gaze pinning Julia like a specimen. Metrics and margins. This is Granada. Feel it. Julia bristled, felt it. She felt exposed, unraveling under those eyes that saw too much. The mockery hung unspoken, a ghost in the air. That night, alone in her cave house, Julia poured a glass of the company's Cabernet and paced the ziggurat of rooms. Who was this woman? A quick Google, Josephine Reyes, 36, decorated Air Force pilot, crashed in a training mishap over Nevada a decade ago. Lost the arm, kept flying, commercial routes, then corporate. Out as a lesbian since West Point, advocate for disabled vets. The profile photo, Joe in flight leathers, grinning against a sunset sky, prosthetic glinting like a badge. Guilt coiled in Julia's gut, sharp as barbed wire. She'd mocked the surface, blind to the depths. But anger followed. Why hire her if Joe knew? A test. Punishment. The next weeks blurred into a tense tango. Mornings at the finca, Joe in the vineyard, cane sunk in loam, directing pruners with gestures precise as checklists. Julia shadowed, notebook in hand, jotting Joe's offhand wisdom, grapes don't lie. People do. Afternoons in the office, heads bent over mock-ups, Joe's laughter rare but seismic when it came, a rumble that shook Julia's resolve. Granada seeped in, unbidden. Julia wandered the Albaicin after hours, losing herself in souks where lanterns swung like fireflies, vendors hawking saffron and secrets. One evening, rain-slicked and restless, she ducked into a tiny taberna, walls papered in faded bullfight posters. Joe was there, at a corner table, fingers, real and forged, wrapped around a capita of sherry. Alone, save for a worn journal. Julia froze. Joe looked up, unsurprised. Harlan. Join or flee? They talked, halting at first, then spilling like overfilled barrels. Joe's stories, childhood in El Paso, bilingual prayers to La Virgin, the roar of F-16s that drowned her doubts. The crash, ejector seat, sand-swept agony, waking to a surgeon's cold promise, you'll fly again, if you fight. Julia shared fragments, mother's cancer at 42, leaving bills and a girl with fists for dreams. I mocked to cope, Julia admitted, voice small over the patter of rain. Stupid armor. Joe's eyes softened, the scar on her jaw catching the lamplight. We all wear it. Mine's titanium. The pull was magnetic, unspoken, a brush of knees under the table, a shared glance that lingered like smoke. Julia dreamed of Joe's hands, one warm, one unyielding, charting skies she couldn't see. But doubt gnawed. Joe was her boss, openly gay in a town where whispers could curdle milk. Julia. She'd dated men in Chicago, safe, scripted affairs that ended in polite texts. This felt like freefall. Weeks turned to months, the campaign launched to acclaim, Julia's billboards dotting Times Square with Sienna Hills and Joe's tagline, roots that run deep. Success brought proximity. Client dinners in Seville, where flamenco dancers stamped fire into the floor, Joe's foot tapping in time despite the cane. One night, post-presentation, they walked the Guadalquivir's banks, Seville's Giralda Tower a golden sentinel. "You're good at this," Joe murmured, wind tugging her collar. "Not just the job. You." Julia's heart stuttered, she reached, fingers grazing Joe's sleeve. "So are you. At everything." Their first kiss was tentative, salt and sherry, the river murmuring approval. Joe pulled back, eyes searching. "This complicates." Julia, bold as ever, life's complications. Love in Granada bloomed like bougainvillea, fierce, thorny, spilling over stone walls. Mornings found them tangled in Joe's casita on the finca's edge, sunlight slanting through shutters as Joe traced Julia's collarbone with her prosthetic fingers, cool metal a contrast to the heat building between them. "Tell me about the stars you chased," Julia whispered once, post-dawn, her head on Joe's chest. Joe spoke of constellations over deserts, how flying stripped her bare, made her confront the woman beneath the uniform. Julia listened, unraveling her own knots, the fear of abandonment, the armor forged in empty Midwest nights. They were equals here, no ranks, no hierarchies, just two women piecing wholes from halves. But Granada's shadows lengthened. The office buzzed with rumors, Elena's sidelong glances sharpened, a client's wife cooed, such a dynamic duo, with arched brows. Joe shrugged it off, let them talk, I've faced tribunals, but Julia felt the weight, a Midwestern prudence clashing with Andalusian fire. She pulled back in public, lunches platonic, touches veiled. Joe noticed, of course. "Hiding?" she asked one evening, over ensalada rusa in the courtyard. Julia flushed. "Protecting us. The job." Joe's laugh was bitter-edged. "I've protected enough. This is real, Jules. Own it." The betrayal brewed slow, insidious. Venedos del Sur's biggest investor, Marcus Hale, a silver fox from Napa with a predatory grin, arrived for a site visit. American through and through, he embodied the ease Julia once craved, yacht clubs, Rolodexes of power. Dinners stretched late, paella and Rioja flowing, Marcus regaling with tales of mergers that minted millionaires. Joe demurred, citing early flights. She still moonlighted charters on weekends, leaving Julia to charm solo. "You're wasted here," Marcus murmured one night, his hand lingering on her elbow as they strolled the vineyard moonlit. "Come to California. Led my team. Real stakes." Flattery was Julia's catnip. She laughed it off, but the seed took root, visions of penthouses, proximity to her old life, a safety net if this Spanish idol soured. Joe was passion, yes, but precarious, disability clauses in contracts, the town's conservative undercurrents. Marcus pressed, emails with job specs, a casual invite to his hotel suite for strategy sessions. Julia forwarded one to Joe, seeking solidarity. Joe's reply, curt. "Handle it. You're the exec." Misstep became chasm. A week later, storm-lashed skies grounding flights, Julia accepted Marcus's dinner, just business, she told herself, slipping into a dress that hugged like ambition. The restaurant, a gilded spot in the Albayacin, overlooked the Darro River's froth. Marcus poured vintage Amontillado, toasting to bold moves. His knee brushed hers, Julia didn't shift. Talk turned personal, his divorce, her exes, she glossed over Joe, a reflex. By dessert, his hand covered hers. "You're electric, Harlan. Don't waste it on vines." She withdrew, polite venom, "I'm committed here." But the damage was done. Joe, tipped by a waiter friend, arrived unannounced, a rain-slicked jacket, cane-tapping fury. The table froze. Marcus smirked, Julia paled. "Joe, it's not," Joe's eyes, storm-dark, cut her off. "Save the debrief. Fly safe, Harlan." She turned, vanishing into the downpour like a ghost jet. The fallout was seismic. Julia stormed Joe's casita next morning, pounding the door till hinges groaned. Joe answered in flight sweats, face carved from granite. "You mocked me once," Joe said, voice low thunder. "Now this. Parading with him like I'm the side quest." Julia's defenses crumbled. He offered security. "You know what I've lost, Mom, jobs, everything unstable." I panicked. Joe's prosthetic word faintly as she clenched it. Panic. Or pattern. "I trusted you with my scars, Jules. You think mine are the only ones." Words flew like shrapnel, Joe's accusations of opportunism, Julia's pleas laced with her own flight fears, fleeing feelings deeper than she'd dared. "I love you," Julia choked, rain from the night still matting her hair. "That's the complication." Joe recoiled, the scar on her jaw twitching. "Love doesn't mock. Or betray." She shut the door, the click echoing like a canopy release. Granada turned hostile. Julia threw herself into work, revisions frantic, her pitches now hollow echoes of Joe's soul. The team tiptoed, Marcus's emails went unanswered, his investment wobbling. Nights, Julia roamed the Sacramento caves, where flamenco wails mirrored her ache, raw, rhythmic grief. She wrote letters she burned, apologies etched in ash. Joe vanished into skies, chartering tourists over the Costa del Sol, her social silence save for cockpit selfies, prosthetic proud against blue infinities. Climax crested in the Sierra, late October, when wildfires licked the foothills, dry lightning sparking tinderbox hills. Venados del Sur mobilized, harvesters as firefighters, Julia coordinating evacuations from the finca's war room, phones glued to ear. Smoke choked the air, acrid as regret. Joe's charter was grounded, but she drove up anyway, truck loaded with gear, volunteering with local crews. Julia spotted her at dawn, silhouetted against flames, Joe directing hoses, cane planted firm, her team a ragtag of vets and villagers. A gust shifted, embers crowned a ridge, trapping two pruners in a gully. Chaos, shouts in Spanish, engines roaring. Joe barked orders, then plunged in, prosthetic arm hauling rope, real hand pulling a man clear as the blaze roared. Julia, on the periphery with water runs, saw it unfold, Joe stumbling, cane lost in soot, flames nipping her heels. Panic surged, Julia sprinted, lungs burning, tackling Joe to safety behind a boulder as a wall of fire whooshed past. They collapsed, coughing, Joe's face smeared black, eyes wild. "You came," Joe rasped. Julia, tears carving tracks in grime, always. In the aftermath, blisters bandaged, vines singed but standing, the Sierra smoldered like a spent cigar. Crews tallied losses, the finca stood, grapes resilient. Joe and Julia sat on the terrace that night, blankets draped, stars pricking the smoke-hazed sky. Silence stretched, companionable now. "I saw you up there," Julia said softly. "Brave as hell." Joe flexed her prosthetic, a faint whir. "Not brave. Stubborn. Like you." She paused, gaze on the dark hills. The mockery. It stung because I hide nothing. The betrayal. That was the blade. Julia nodded, throat tight. "I was scared, of losing control, of loving someone who flies away. But you ground me, Joe. In every way." Joe turned, her hand, warm, real, covering Julia's. Then stay landed. "With me." The kiss was fire-scarred, tentative, then sure, forgiveness in the press of lips, the Sierra whispering absolution. Winter cloaked Granada in silver, mornings mist-shrouded, afternoons crisp as fresh-pressed olive oil. Joe and Julia rebuilt, brick by careful brick. No grand gestures, instead, quiet rituals, Joe teaching Julia to prune vines, fingers intertwined in soil, explaining how cuts birth stronger growth. Julia reciprocated with American quirks, Thanksgiving turkey roasted in a tagine, stories of Ohio snowdrifts that made Joe laugh till her sides ached. The office thawed, Elena baked Magdalena's as peace offerings, Marcus's deal salvaged with Julia's unyielding no. Whispers faded, replaced by nods of respect, two women, unapologetic, steering the ship. Yet depth demanded reckoning. Jo's crash anniversary loomed, November's end, the date etched in her journal like a fault line. Julia sensed it, Jo's silences lengthening, flights cancelled for maintenance that was really memory. Talk to me, Julia urged one evening, as they hiked the Sierra trails, Jo's cane crunching frost-kissed leaves. Jo halted, breath clouding. That day. I was cocky. Pushed the jet too hard over the dunes. Ejected at 20,000 feet, chute barely bloomed before impact. Her voice cracked, rare fracture. Woke up half gone. The arm, the dreams. Folks said quit flying, I said screw that. But some nights, I wonder if I dragged everyone down with me. Julia pulled her close, the wind off the peaks carrying pine and promise. You lifted them. Me included. She shared her own abyss, the night after Mom's funeral, 18 and adrift, Julia stealing a car for a joyride that ended in cuffs and a judge's mercy. I mocked to armor up, betrayed to test exits. But you. You're my horizon, Jo. Steady. Healing wove through holidays, Christmas in the Alhambra, its courtyard strung with lights, Jo's family video calling from El Paso, as well as clucking approval at the redhead who tames our Josephine. New Year's on the terrace, fireworks blooming over the Albaicin, Julia's head on Jo's shoulder as bells tolled midnight. To roots, Jo toasted, glasses clinking. And wings. Spring unfurled verdant, grapes swelling like secrets. The betrayal scar faded to silver, a reminder not wound. Julia's campaign evolved, infusing Jo's stories, labels etched with pilot's logs, ads of scarred hands cradling bottles, taglines shifting to forged in fire, poured with heart. Sales soared, not just metrics but meaning, letters from queer vets toasting Jo's visibility, Midwestern moms discovering Spain through a daughter's lens. But drama's echo lingered in small tremors. A rival importer poached Elena, dangling Napa perks, Julia tempted, briefly, old habits whispering escape. Jo saw it, didn't push. Choose your sky, she said simply, over café con leche. Julia chose Earth, promotion to co-lead, her name beside Jo's on the letterhead. We're a team, she told the board, Jo's hand brushing hers under the table, unseen, unbreakable. The humanistic close came unscripted, on a Sierra summit at solstice, wildflowers rioting purple and gold. Jo proposed, not with rings, but a vintage aviator's compass, engraved, true north, us. Julia, tears blurring the view, nodded into Jo's neck. Yes. Always. They descended hand in hand, cane tapping rhythm to their steps, Granada sprawling below like a lover's palm, flawed, fierce, forever. In the years that followed, Venetos del Sur became legend, a label for the unbroken, wines that tasted of second chances. Julia and Jo adopted a rescue dog, a lanky galgo with a limp to match Jo's, naming her Sierra, for the hills that tested and held them. Mornings, they'd walk the vines, debating vintages, dreaming expansions, a queer artist's retreat in the casita, scholarships for disabled pilots. Julia never mocked again, Jo flew less, rooted more. Betrayal's blade dulled to a bookmark in their story, a chapter that forged, not felled. Granada, with its layered histories, taught them, love isn't absence of storm, but dancing through it. Two American souls in Spanish soil, they bloomed, human, whole, winged.